So if you haven't been to one of these things before, welcome to the webinar. And in a couple of minutes' time, I'll just kick off by saying how we run these things and what you can do and so on and so forth, and how you can participate as well. So just while we're waiting for the last few people to come in, so a welcome to the new crew, the new people who have joined us for the first time. It's great to, well, for you to see me. So Craig S, very welcome. David F, Furey, lovely to see your name on the screen, and really appreciate you taking up your morning with this. That's great. And Laurie, how nice to see you, or for you to see me. Probably not, but I can't think of any other way to say it. And people who have come back again and again, Alan L, Amanda, Priya, Savannah-san, and Katie, Katie W, because I think we probably have more than one Katie this morning. But anyway, welcome back, and welcome to the first time if you're joining us for the first time. So we're going to start in a couple of minutes. If you haven't been before, I think I'll go over some of the ground rules. You're automatically muted at our end, so there is absolutely nothing you can do at your end to interfere with what's going on for everybody else. There's plenty of opportunity to join in if you want to, in so much as there's a Q&A pane or a questions tab. Now, if you have a technical question and want to, and because something's going wrong for you, best thing to do is to preface your comment with Nicola or tech or something like that, so Nicola knows that she's the one who's supposed to respond to it. And if something comes up and you think, oh, what about that? What about that? Don't wait until the end, because when I ask at the end at about 10:05, does anybody have any questions? You might have forgotten by then. So tap away or scribble something down and then tap it into the questions pane at the end. If we, so I've got about 35, normally about 30 to 35 minutes of material for you. Now, if we, we'll get to that about 10:05, and then there'll be a Q&A session. If we run out of time for the Q&A, I don't know how many people will have questions today, then I'll stay on after. I'll aim to finish at 15:15 or there, give or take a minute, and then I'll come back afterwards. I'll stay here afterwards to make sure that everybody's questions have actually been answered properly. So if you can stick around, if for injury time after 10:15, you're most welcome, and I guarantee that I will answer everybody's question, hopefully somewhat to your satisfaction. And if the answer is not good enough, tell me, and I'll have another crack at it. I think that's about it. Yes. And we are now 9:30 on the dot, so I think we'll get cracking with who we've got, and if people walk in the door after that, that's absolutely fine, and they'll just have to catch up. So recap. So I'm going to start off with a recap from last time, because this is a two-part webinar, as you know, and this is part 2. And so I'll bring you up to speed with what happened last time. And then I want to speak a bit about why we make the same mistakes again and again in these difficult conversations. I want to also, I'm going to talk about the role of honesty, and that is one of the casualties of conversations when we get unhappy with each other, and I get a touch on that a couple of times. And then, of course, most importantly, some sort of solution. How do we decide what to do next? And then what do we actually do next? What's the key strategy for turning around a conversation that's gone sour or has just become really difficult? And then what can get in the way of that? So I'm going to be asking you what you find difficult about that particular strategy, and I'll sort of give you some options, and then I'll answer. I'll probably speak to the three most popular ones. There'll be a poll so that we know. I can get a gauge on what you want to hear. And that's it. And then the Q&A, as I said. So okay, we'll get moving now. If you've just joined, since I can see a lot of people have joined since I started talking, I've just kind of done the content section, so you haven't missed anything. You can relax, sit back, and we'll get moving. People still coming in the door, so I think we'll just get moving. Don't worry, you haven't missed anything yet. I've just been doing a little bit of a content section. So I'm going to switch my camera off now so that you can focus on the screens. And for those who have just arrived, a big welcome to the March webinars, The Psychology of Challenging Conversations and the Power to Change the Game. So as I said to the others last month, we had a look at option 1 for moving things along in a difficult conversation, and this month is option 2. And if I'm really honest with you, if I'm on a sort of mission, as you know, to try and promote simplicity and experimentation and provoke you to think, this for me is absolutely the silver bullet, and I say that very carefully. The strategy that I'm going to show you today, and I'm loath to call it a technique because it's a very human thing to do when we're thinking straight, is for me the single most powerful thing we can do towards people to help things go right. So what is a conversation? Here's the recap then. Well, the way I look at it is it's the most basic unit of a relationship, and if you extrapolate that, it's also the most basic unit of how we run companies, how we lead people, how we speak to our customers. And we use conversations in lots of different ways. We use them to manage people, to show love, to exchange information, which is probably the one we often look at first, to learn, to teach, to encourage. And of course, there is also the flip side. We also, sometimes without thinking, but often with thinking, we use conversations for other reasons. Now, I'm not value judging how you use your conversations, but I think what I am saying is that doing the things in red isn't wrong. It's just if we choose to go in that direction, we need to do it with awareness and know that we're going to have to suffer some sort of consequences, or the other person is going to. Well, actually, let's face it, all of us are going to suffer consequences. So those are some of the less happy uses. I won't say negative, because actually sometimes you want to frighten somebody. Sometimes you need to manipulate somebody to get them into the right place. I don't know. It's for your conscience. Sometimes we want to avoid. So two streams in a conversation, as I explained last time, and we have often when we're talking to somebody and it's already started to go wrong, something's gone wrong, then what we forget, and as I mentioned last time, is that there is this other thing going on, which is the feelings underneath the facts. So it's not really about what's going on in the conversation necessarily at a factual level. Up here, this upset up here and here about the files. Actually, these are the words and the objects, but down here is where it's really happening. But for the most part, we ignore that and we try and blast through at this level. The problem with sticking to the facts is, of course, that we all regard facts differently. If I have my car keyed in the car park this afternoon and you were to have your car done at the same time, if we were to have a conversation immediately afterwards, we would be exchanging very different reactions. Just because we look at these things differently, and we have different things going on in our lives, and we have, I don't know, different amount of resources. It's just different. So sticking to facts doesn't work for loads of different reasons. Now, when it starts going wrong, and this is the irony, we can all see it. We can all see the weather changing. We all start to feel uneasy. Well, there are lots of clues, aren't there? We start to look uncomfortable and act uncomfortable. We start to tap dance. We start to avoid issues. We use language more carefully. We start to interrupt each other. We start to draw breath. And what we also start to do is yes, but. And that's the thing that you will notice with people. Even when it's really super polite, people start yes, butting each other. So what happens next? Well, actually, what we don't really recognize that often is that it's actually really simple to make a good decision about what to do next. But most of the time we overcomplicate it. We've got too much going on in the room. We are having too many feelings. And so it's very difficult to remember sometimes how simple it is. And here are just a few scenarios. Relatively speaking, if we're in a conversation together, this could be situation number one, where relatively speaking, you're more comfortable than me. In this case, as we discussed in the last webinar, the thing to do here, I'm just going to thicken the pen up a bit. The thing to do here is for me to be assertive. For me to say to you how I am feeling so that I can have an effect on myself in my own head, in my brain. I can literally alter my brain chemistry with that. A little bit more about that later. But also so that you realise that it's not going well and you can cut me some slack, or you can take some responsibility for that. The second possibility is that, relatively speaking, this is going on. And this is what we're going to do today. There are some other scenarios. In fact, we'll also cover this one today, where everybody's not madly happy. But there is always either me or you, if we choose to, that we can actually do something different. We can break that tradition, that we can interrupt that trajectory if we want to, and if we know how to. And one of the things today is I'm going to show you how to. I can't determine whether you'll actually want to, and that's an internal intellectual emotional fight that you'll have to get some practice at. So now back up to present date, let's assume that it's already started to kick off. We all know that feelings very often take over. There's an issue on the table. In fact, we start to have the feelings even before we turn up for the conversation. We know that when that meeting appears in our diary, it's going to be difficult. And so when we actually get into the room, the feelings have already started to take over. And the way that we express ourselves, the way that we position our arguments, who speaks first, all of those things start to take over. But I think a number of other things are happening which are very, very rarely acknowledged. One is that we start to develop theories behind what people are doing, and very often we give them far too much credit for their ability to be tactical. And we start to paint a mental picture and create a reputation for people that then makes us act differently towards them. Essentially, we demonize people, or we deify them. We put them on a pedestal, or we make them look bad in our heads, and then everything changes, even before a conversation has started. So we develop these archetypes. We like that. Why do we do it? Because it's safer. If I know what to expect, then I know what to do about it. And so, giving these people names and reputations makes it really difficult to get away from this personality clash. But even then, we don't really talk about feelings. We talk about personalities. We talk about positions. We talk about posts. Well, marketing would say that, wouldn't they? Because they don't actually have to go and close the deal. Or, yeah, well, that's typical production, isn't it? To be slow when I said it would be there for Tuesday. So we put people into camps, we put people into boxes, we give them personalities and motivations that they don't even have. So, what are the key mistakes that are occurring here? Well, one is this demonization, or this role, these roles that we accord people, and the motivations that we in our heads we say that they have. But the other thing that we do is that we make it all about the thing. We get fixated on the objects, the things that we can see, the words that we exchange. The closest we get is to talk about maybe the principle. It's not that it's, you know, it's not just this deal, it's the principle of it and the fact that dispatch didn't do it fast enough. So, and we see the signs, but we don't go there. We stay away from that because we think it's too dangerous. It's too messy. We think that maybe we can win with facts, but actually what happens is that we don't. We start lobbing more and more facts and arguments at one another. And so we get caught in this arms race, which is, as I said last time, and we forget to look. We forget to look in from outside and say, what on earth is going on here? Oh my gosh, I can see what's kicking off. You might be one person, a type of person who can see it. And if you are, you may then get stuck because you don't really know what to do next. You can see it kicking off, and maybe a lot of you can. But then it's daring to break that dynamic, to stop the battle. You may feel that you don't have the seniority. You may feel that because it's not your strong topic and you're not a content expert, you're not allowed to stop the action because people will just shout you down. They'll say, well, you just don't understand. But actually, that's not the point. And sometimes, if we can bring ourselves to, we need to say, no, it's not about the content. It's not about this. It's about this. It's about the fact that John looks really annoyed. That's the problem here. And I don't, John, I'm not blaming you, but I can see you're annoyed. And I can see Erica, daring to do that is an absolute shortcut to doing something completely different. And I'm going to come into more detail about how to actually put that into words. Now, the other thing that I want to also mention for why this happens is that actually we are sentient beings. When I was preparing this yesterday, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to show everybody a clip and see if it winds everybody up in the same way that it's winding me up? And then I started selecting some different clips from YouTube and noticed that I was getting really annoyed. I mean, I think, this is absolute garbage on YouTube most of the time. It's a real time waster. But oh my goodness, I couldn't help. Is this me? Write to me afterwards. Is this me? I'm just really easily wound up. So I thought, I kind of did the experiment on myself. Looking at material, witnessing it, even if we're not even participating in it, is enough to get a rise out of us. And so, what's that about? Well, as much as anything, it's about biology. It's about the way we're put together. We are sentient beings. We feel stuff. We're not a machine. And, you know, there's often the metaphor is used, oh, you know, we're very complex, your brain is a very complex machine. No, it's not. It's so much bigger than that. The sum of the parts just doesn't even begin to explain, and the chemistry and the brain chemistry and the neuroscience. Yes, we can look at it all on the screen, but actually when you're in it, when you're feeling it, my God, it's difficult to step out. And that is the challenge that we face. Knowing this stuff to begin with is a golden start, because you on this webinar already know more than most people. And if you can just remember one of these things, just to even stop, just to interrupt a particular tradition or dynamic, that is already immensely powerful. You already are putting yourself potentially in the driving seat to be able to change the game. So, time for some solutions. Time to get down to, okay, so what do we do about this, Paul? So back to the parallel lines, which I've drawn for you a couple of times. So, okay, so we've got these facts here, and now we're starting to think, okay, this isn't about the facts anymore. This is about the feelings about it. So we're starting to understand the situation for what it is now. So how do we change the game without just making it our game by deploying a bigger point or principle? Because there is a danger that the person who steps in to stop the fight, I don't know if you've ever been unfortunate enough to witness a fight in a pub or anywhere else for that matter, but the person to step in is often the next one to get punched. Because both people then turn on her or him and say, get out of the way. This is not your fight. So there has to be a way. We can't rely on strength or a better argument than the current participants to stop the fight. So saying things like, this isn't a very good idea the way it's going, or I think we should change the subject, or I think we need to leave it at that, or I think we need to agree to disagree. That for me is okay. Hey, a load better than nothing. But I think there's something even better than we can do. So the question is, how do we get from up here to down there? Last month I mentioned one way is to be assertive, is to be honest and say, you know, I'm annoyed, or I'm really distracted, or I'm not very happy. The other way is something completely different. But first, what we have to do is to stop. First, we have to stop the action. So you decide, you see that you see something going wrong, and you think, okay, I need to give myself that jolt, that bravery. And so and then you say, okay, who's coming off worse here? What situation am I in here? Is this scenario 1, 2, or 3? Well, actually, I think it's probably scenario 1. I'm feeling okay because I can notice, but the rest of them, and you could be 3 people, aren't doing so well. Okay, I know what to do now. That's a case for empathy. And that's the decision made. The question is, how? Well, one of the mistakes that people make, and it's a small mistake, but it's significant, is that they wait. They wait for the right moment, and there is no right moment when things are already going badly. So you just have to get stuck in. You just kind of land on the conversation and take over. And that takes some bravery to do, because most of us has been socialized to not interrupt, to not do this stuff, to not interject, to wait until people have finished. So as the seagull has pointed out here, there is something we can do, which is to actually call out, and this is how we empathize. We actually call out what's going on here. You sound worried. You seem annoyed. It sounds like what's really upset you, Jane, is... So what we're doing is calling out the elements of what we're seeing. The first element is how the other person seems to be feeling. That's the most important bit. So rather than call out our feelings this time, because relatively speaking, we're feeling okay and we see that they're suffering more or they're more discombobulated, we call out their feelings. You sound annoyed. You seem angry. You seem fed up. It sounds like it's not going very well for you. You're really not happy with this. That's already fantastic. But if we can actually pinpoint, if you can pinpoint what that feeling is mostly about, you sound really annoyed about this third order going astray. You seem worried that the finance committee haven't actually got to the bottom of the problem. You seem sceptical that we're going to be able to make a decision by the end of today. So that's the what about bit. Now, if we really want to go Rolls-Royce, then we can add that bit. It's not essential, but it really helps. And if you're paying attention and you give yourself some practice at this, you'll get better and better at spotting what that why sounds like. Often I find myself, Paul finds himself starting that sentence with something like, I guess that's because, or I imagine that's because, you know, you sound sceptical about whether we'll be able to reach a decision today. I guess that's because we haven't yet heard from everybody. Or because we haven't yet got finances input to this. So there are those three distinct ingredients that turn up again and again. This is the most important. This is great to have, and that's Rolls-Royce. The pause at the end is ultra important. It gives the other person in the conversation or people in the conversation the opportunity to come back and say, yeah, you're absolutely right, or no, it's not really that. I'm not really worried. Actually, I'm frustrated. Oh gosh, okay. So I got that bit wrong. And that correction is absolutely fine. In fact, sometimes it's better than fine because it gives us a second stab at it, and they can then hear that we're making corrections, that we're prepared to make corrections in our thinking, in our hypothesis about them. And that's extremely reassuring. So, so far, just to recap and maybe to give you a chance to ask yourself, do I have any questions at this stage? We've realised that when we get into a scrap or a conversation becomes challenging, we can see the signs, but we often don't do something about it. Option one is to speak up about our own feelings if we think that we're coming off worse, relatively speaking, if we're becoming the most incapacitated. But if we see the other people or person involved in the challenging conversation is coming off worse, then we have the opportunity to take those smelling salts and say, right, okay, I've got to do something here, and it seems to be about their feelings. I can empathise instead. So if you have any questions or thoughts so far that you'd like to put, then that would be a good moment to jot here. I'm just going to give you a few seconds to jot down any questions in the questions tab on your little control panel there. Okay. So, what are the consequences of empathizing like this? What difference does it actually make? Well, I'm going to look at it from three different levels: social, intellectual, and neural. At a social level, here are parallel lines again, it actually gets feelings up into the conversation where where they belong. This is where they belong up here, side by side with the actual technical issues, with the bits of paper. That's the first thing. They also calm people down. So once people start being able to discuss their feelings, something happens neurally. Well, I might just skip to that bit. Neurally, they start to function differently. So what you see here in this picture is it's a scan, and the thing that's lit up because it's hot. This blood supply is, or two of them are enriched. Are the amygdala, or the amygdalae, and this is where the chemicals that produce those signals to say I'm not happy, I'm frightened, I'm angry, that's where they come from. That's the central part of that particular system. However, when we start to actually talk about those feelings, we've found in the last few years, researchers in the area have found that something completely different starts to happen. The amygdalae actually start to calm down. They sort of they just become less active. And there's something up here, roughly here, and there's only one of them, interestingly, called it the right orbitoprefrontal cortex. It's a collection of cells, of nuclei that then start doing some work. We think it's because they're more linguistic, they're more to do with foresight and sort of higher thinking capability. So actually naming feelings, bringing them into the conversation up here, has a profound neural effect. So that's one of the reasons we feel better. At a social level, it's just nice to be understood. At an intellectual level, what it seems to do is to free people up to think. They can be happier, freer to participate in the conversation again. We free them, we do first aid on them, we free them from the nets of their feelings, so that they can look beyond the obvious, look beyond the difference, and start to become really coherent and creative again. So that's the simple version of what's actually happening. Now, realistically, we need to talk about barriers, because I don't think there'll be a person in the room this morning who'll say, yeah, nah, I don't think that's going to work, Paul, somehow. I mean, there might be. And if there is, for goodness sake, put it in the questions tab. It would be great to hear from you, and you would be helping somebody else. So if you're skeptical, you think, I'm not really sure about this one, I can't see how that's going to work, this is a good time to say it. Really. What I'm going to do next, though, is to, whilst you're having a think, I'm going to put up a poll, because I want you to decide what happens next in this webinar. And let me just get rid of these particular elements now. So the next bit, as I said, I want you to decide what happens. 5 reasons that people have in the past, and this is taken from a list of a dozen reasons that people have come up with on programs with us. But I've chosen the 5 that turn up the most often, and what I need you to do is to say which one you want to hear about. So the first one we'll call guessing. If you're interested in this one, just put guessing in your Q&A pane. So this is about. In fact, I can actually put. There we go. I think you can. There we are. Here are the titles. Unfortunately, having screwed up the poll, you can't vote, but here are the titles. Would you like to hear about guessing about someone else's feelings sounds risky, so I'm not going to? Would you like to hear about, and I'm going to do 3 of the 5, by the way. What if I create a feeling that wasn't there to begin with? In other words, if I empathise and I'm wrong, are they going to turn around and say, oh, now that you mention it, yeah, I am bloody annoyed. Would that put you off? Or would it put you off if you thought you were going to get the feeling wrong, so better not to try in the first place? Or would it put you off more from empathizing if you were worried about patronising them? Or finally, would it worry you more if you were you thought you'd make it worse by telling somebody that they sounded angry or annoyed? So making it worse. So we'll call the first one guessing. We'll call the second one create. Wrong feeling is the third one. Patronise is the fourth one. And make it worse or worse is the fifth one. So I'm going to keep an eye now on the Q&A tab and see what you're actually voting. The votes are coming in thick and fast. I think patronised and worse getting the feeling wrong, angry. Yeah, 2, 4, and 5. Create feeling. Okay, I'm going to go. Nobody's come up with guessing, so I'm going to leave that one alone. Patronise and wrong feeling and feeling worse. Okay, let's do that then. All right then. So let's go for patronised. So the patronised one, what's that about? Well, I suppose that probably has more to do with how I might just switch my camera on here because I'm not going to put anything up on the screen. This probably has more to do with how you were brought up with the whole feelings thing. And certainly in my household, you were allowed certain types of feelings. You were allowed to feel happy. You were allowed to feel excited. You weren't allowed to worry or get angry. And so that was shut down. Worry was shut down typically with biscuits, food, a treat, a cuddle. And angry was just shut down with anger. So So if you think about it, one of my first reluctances to go with empathy was often based on, gosh, I'm stating the bleeding obvious. People aren't going to want to go there. Why should they want to? They're going to think I'm being weird, or worse, if they're more senior than me, patronising. And they're going to think that I'm being really cheeky for raising it. So the reality, though, is that when people are upset, they don't actually know what we're doing. They just know that something different has happened and it feels better than what they had before. So worrying about patronising people, I can see why, but it's one of those, actually they won't even know I'm doing it. Getting the wrong, that patronised was the biggest one actually that you named. About 10 of you asked for that. Making things worse by stating somebody is angry. Okay. With this one, you may think, if you've been successful at empathising with somebody, in other words, if you've hit the nail on the head correctly, it may look like you have made it worse, because often what you'll get, if they're already annoyed, they'll say, well, yes, I am. And another thing, what about the last board meeting where blah, blah, blah? And you think, oh, God, I've just opened a Pandora's box. This is dreadful. No, it's brilliant. You've absolutely nailed it. What you've actually done is signal to them that they have permission to talk about feelings. And they're just coming up with more. So actually, what you've done, to use a metaphor, you've opened the floodgates. You've given them the opportunity to just say what's on your mind, say what's in your heart, say what's going on for you. The main thing is that you stay out of the way, that you remain the facilitator. Don't take it personally. You haven't done anything wrong. In fact, quite the reverse. You've done something amazing. But part of the magic of this, part of the power of empathy is how quickly it happens, and sometimes how messy it looks, but that's a necessary part of people becoming more coherent. So if you think you've made it worse, you've probably done an amazing job. Stay with it. Stay empathizing. Stay watching what's happening. And they will come around really quickly. And the third one, okay, I think create turns up. I'm just checking. Wrong feeling. Oh, wrong feeling. Yeah, wrong feeling. Wrong feelings turning up. Okay, so wrong feeling. Okay, so here's the scenario. You say you sound irritated about the fact that I was late with this report for board. No problem. I'm not irritated. I'm really annoyed. Oh, okay. Okay, it's worse than I thought. I can see that you're annoyed now. So actually, getting the feeling wrong gives us an opportunity, and I think I said this a bit earlier, to make the correction, but they can see that we're making the correction. They can hear it and think, oh my God, he's really or she's really paying attention. Wow, that's amazing. Now, they're not going to say that, but that's probably what's going on in their heads. When we have to make a correction, when we get it a bit wrong, they can see that we truly are following them, that we're not just doing an act. So don't worry about being polished or about stumbling around. If anything, the only thing to do is to worry about keeping it really short and using the fewest number of words possible. You sound annoyed. You look really fed up. And then let them and do that magical pause which lets them agree with you or say, no, it's not that, it's this. Well, it's more this. Getting it wrong, now that I think about it, actually helps people to express themselves more. They tell us some more of the story, and that's exciting. Then we really know we're on an express train. You know that you've done a really cracking job of empathizing. So those are some of the barriers that we've touched on. I don't mind coming back in a bit with more of them. There is a question already, and now we've got to that magical bit of the webinar where it is, in fact, time for for some questions, for your thoughts. So Amanda asks, how do I ask the speaker a question? Oh, I see. No, I now see what Amanda said. She's actually figuring out, how do I ask Paul a question? So if you want to ask me a question, Amanda, you can. Well, I'm just now scanning through the rest of the list for other questions. Okay, so here's one. From Hillary. What about if you have to have a difficult conversation with someone who is very emotional? You have to call them out on, e.g., the rudeness to your staff. Oh, okay. And they're already emotional about it. Okay. It sounds like you've got just as many feelings about that as they have, maybe. You're worried that they're going to fly off the handle at you. So if you notice that that's making you really nervous, Hillary, and it risks making you tap dance or do something uncomfortable or weird or fudging it in front of them, it's best to say that straight off the bat, Hillary. So you're talking to Jane. Look, Jane, I need to give you some feedback, but I've got to tell you, I'm quite nervous about doing it. And I'm nervous because I think you're probably going to take this rather badly. And then Jane will probably say, well, just tell me. And you can say, well, actually, I heard you. I was really upset yesterday when I saw you speaking to Peter like that in the corridor. So the advice is free yourself up first by being assertive, and then give the feedback. And then if you can possibly manage it, when she goes, well, it was his fault. He's really winding me up. He's doing it on purpose. You know, that's what you don't see about Peter. You can say, well, Jane, you sound really pissed off with Peter. You actually sound also a bit pissed off with me for actually raising it. So then you switch into empathy. Hopefully that's helpful, Hilary. Philippa, if you do this consistently, could you get known for it and people get tired of you doing it? In my experience, will people get to know you for it? Yeah, they will. But they won't get to know you for the technique, because really it's almost not really a technique. I mean, it's a really human thing to notice that someone's upset. We do it with our friends and our family and our loved ones. Maybe. If you don't, start. But because it's not really a technique, and because it's so generous, and actually because people don't notice that we're actually doing it, for the most part, I don't think anybody's, I mean, my family, okay, case in point, my family, you know, Claire and I, we've been together 20 years, more than 20 years, and the girls, 16 and 17, they've grown up with it. When I empathise with them, or when we empathise with each other, we don't say, oh, you're doing that bloody empathy thing. It's because we're so buried in the feeling, we're just glad of a bit of help. So I think people will get to know you as somebody who is helpful. I think the problem that you'll have, Philippa, is that the queue outside your door might get rather long. So that's the only penalty, I think, that people will realise that they can come to you as a non-judgmental, easy to talk to, unobstructive person to share with. Hopefully that helps, Philippa. Okay. And Alan has a piece of advice for me when I was complaining about my flax milk. It might have been before you joined us. He said, stick with dairy. A farming related, vaguely related client. Thanks, Alan. Good advice. I definitely will. You'll notice I haven't touched my coffee, and yes, I hope you notice the branded mug. Right. Any other questions? I think before we just finish off, we've got 1 minute to go. Oh, Philip has said we'll try to be brave and try it more at work. Fantastic. I'm going to do this one in injury time. Savannah San has asked about what happens when people don't accept empathy. I'm going to come back to that. I'm just going to do a little recap here, just in case you all need to go on time. So final thoughts. First thought, there are two types of facts. Facts and feeling facts, and the feeling facts, as you can see, are really important. The second final thought is that you've got to get to the feelings before they get to you. And lastly, go straight for the jugular. Don't mess around when you're empathizing. All you have to say is you seem, you sound, you look, ... and the name of the feeling. There we go. It's 10:15. That's my lot. I want to thank, before you all go, I want to thank Nicola, who is behind there feverishly battling away with all the technicalities. She's the one who does all the lists and helps to get you enrolled for these webinars. It takes a good week's worth of effort to get it all together. So big thanks to her. Big thanks to you for entrusting us with an important hour of your Friday morning before you go off for your weekend. It was great to see your name on the screens. Thank you so much for your participation and your questions. If you have more questions and I haven't yet answered your question, stick around now and I'll do my best to give you an answer that satisfies. We've got another webinar on the next webinar, 31st of May, Friday the 31st of May, date for your diary. We don't know what the topic is yet. We'd love you to suggest it. We've got a couple of ideas, but right now, yeah, chuck us an idea and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Try some more of this disgusting coffee. That's bad. So, Savannah San, you had a question, which is what do you do when somebody doesn't accept the empathy that you've tried to show them? Well, guess what? It's you empathise with them again. And it might sound something like this. Dave, it sounds like I've annoyed you even more now by drawing attention to it. And then they can explain. It may be, if indeed this does happen or has happened to you when you've done it, it may be that it's just too close to home for them. It's just too prickly. It's too difficult. And that's okay. And if he says, look, no, just leave it alone, say, okay, that's fine. But I could see that you were uncomfortable, and I just wanted you to know that I'd noticed. But I'm prepared to leave it. Either way, what you've done, Savannah-san, is to actually get the feelings up at eye level where they belong. That's the really important thing. Let me just see if there are any. Hopefully that's a good enough answer for you. I'm going to scroll up to see if there are any other possibilities. Here we go. Empathy is lovely. Amanda says this is lovely, but what happens if all you get is someone shrugging their shoulders and being non-communicative? Amanda, that's a cracking question. Sit with it. It sounds like very woo-woo, but sit with the silence. That is where you have to be intellectually and interpersonally brave. Sit with it. And then if it really goes on, you'll be able to see things going on with them. And if you really don't know and you don't want to hazard a guess, your get out of jail free card, which I use a lot, is penny for them. Penny for them. And then more silence. Or what's on your mind? And more silence. So sit with it. Give them time. Golden gift if you can bring yourself to do it. Hope that helps, Amanda. And I'm just having a final. Somebody said, "Will I share the slides later?" Yes, absolutely. I think that has about covered it for today. That I wish that our politicians had exposure to this. Yes, thanks, Hugh. I too. I think that's about it. Oh, hang on. One from Furey. Sorry about that. I almost missed it. There's lots on screen here. How do you avoid being the only person who asks the difficult questions? Now, I'm going to assume, Furey, that you think this is about asking questions. It's actually about making statements. So I'm going to clear up two possibilities. One is that you think this is a question. It's not, it's a statement. It's a humble hypothesis. So that's one thing. That's empathy. But if your question relates to what do I do if I notice that I'm noticing bad stuff, but nobody else seems to, how often can I start to speak up? Can I speak up without annoying everybody? You know what? There's something to be said for saying how it feels to be the only one speaking up. So being assertive. I'm nervous. This is how it might sound. I'm worried about raising another point because it seems to be just me this morning. What I wanted to say was blah. So you kind of get that off your chest. It's your job, and I know that you're in the world of non-execs, non-exec directors, and it is your job to ask questions, and it is your job to empathise and to help people to accept feedback. You can't make them do it, but that's exactly why you're there. So you keep at it, and if you're embarrassed or feel awkward, say so. Get that burden off your shoulders. David had an extra question as well. How do you get someone to recognize your feelings in the conversation to prevent them from just focusing on the facts? Good one, David. That one was in the last webinar. Please look at the video that's up on YouTube. Very happy to remind you of the link if you want it, but here it is in a nutshell. It's actually, I'm going to take you back to an earlier screen. Here we go. I'm looking, bear with me. Faces, here we go. So this, what you're actually talking about, David, is this scenario here when you're, relatively speaking, feeling less happy than the other person or people. That's the opportunity to be assertive. So that's when you need to actually let people tell them how you are feeling about it. And hang on. Okay. That's weird. You can't see the screen. Thank you very much. I've just had can't see the screen. I'm just going to see if I can swap that around. Bear with me. It was paused. There we go. Ha! Well done, Nicola. There you go. You see, she saves my bacon every time. So here we go. So this is what you were referring to, David. This is the scenario. I'm not feeling great. Everybody else is feeling a little bit less not great than me. So I need to say it. I need to get it off my chest and say, look, I've just got to stop. I'm not happy about this. Or I'm really uncomfortable with this decision, or I'm uneasy about the way this conversation's going. So yes, you need to speak up. That's how you get people to recognize your feelings. I think I've captured the last one. Great. Again, thanks for joining. Thanks for staying for injury time. Have a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you next month. All the best. Bye.